Philippians chapter 4. We have two verses before us this morning, and I hope that we will be able to get through them. One thing that is a mark of good traditions, of even at the most surface level of wise living, is that you think and act. You think and you act. It is often best that you first think and then you act, but you can look at people, individuals, families, societies, and you will be able to tell, are these people developing the way in which they go through life in such a way that they think and act? We have three holidays that sort of tend to, rapid fire succession one another. We have the holiday of Thanksgiving, which we are probably still recovering from. Then we have Christmas and New Year. Each one of these have built into the traditions that we have received thinking and acting. In Thanksgiving, we were given one day a year from our forefathers to thank God. That requires that we think, that we recall what has God given to us, how has God chosen to be merciful to us, what are the blessings that God has bestowed upon us in this last year? And then we act. We then respond to God with thanking Him. We tend to also couple it with other actions too. We gather together with friends and family and we eat, which is indeed an action. But you're able to see the way in which we understand that there should be a day to which we recall and respond is thinking and acting. Christmas is the same. We have just begun today that Advent season where we indeed think about the Son of God coming to this world, adding to his deity humanity so that he would, and he did, die in the place of God's people, reconciling them to God, enabling in the gospel of forgiveness to be offered to any sinner if they would come to Jesus Christ in repentance and faith. In that sense, we think about all of the prophecies and their fulfillment in the person and work of Jesus Christ in Christmas. And we have a lot of things to help us, don't we? We have songs. We actually call them Christmas carols. We have colors. I don't see as much red and green as I expected to, but it will increase. We decorate our houses. We decorate our church buildings, businesses, city buildings. In this way, we don most of the world in which we have control over with a certain kind of attire to mark out the season that we are thinking about the first coming of the Messiah. And then we act. Many of you maybe in this last weekend have acted, going about getting gifts so that you might give something to someone that you love. In other ways, we repeat Thanksgiving. We gather with friends and family and we eat. And uniquely as a church, we gather in different ways during the Christmas season so that we might think and act in worship. New Year's Day is also thinking and acting. Hopefully there is some consideration that what has happened in the last year. How were the decisions that you made? Do you need to reconsider choices, patterns, disciplines, habits, so that you might live a better year in 2025? We build into these three holidays thinking and acting, and it's a good thing. That's a wise way to go through life. People who do not think and act are people whom you should be afraid of. You should distance yourself from. You need to learn how to think and act. Well, in Philippians chapter 4, verses 8 and 9, this is a summary to the first 9 verses of Philippians chapter 4, where Paul is talking about God's peace coming to God's people, such that amid even difficult circumstances, Opponents from outside of the church, false teachers inside of the church, even division among significant church members. He wants them to have God's peace to guide them. And here we are able to see a promise is given for God himself to be with them if they will do two things. And the two things that enable God's peace because of God's presence with them is to think and to act. Christian, this morning we'll be able to look at these two disciplines that should mark every individual Christian. It should also mark every congregation of the Lord Jesus Christ, so that God's presence would be with us, and therefore it would guide us with his peace. The two disciplines are you need to think and you need to act. If you would read with me or hear me read aloud Philippians chapter 4, verses 8 and 9. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is dignified, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, consider these things. The things you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Now, we are able to see very clearly in the last clause of verse 8, the command to think. In this translation, it is rendered consider. In the New American Standard, it's rendered dwell on. Your translation may say something like meditate. But the command is given to the original Christians in the church at Philippi, and it is given to us today that we are commanded to think on certain things. You can also see the second one, and this is the second point. We are commanded in verse 9 to practice. That is another way to say to do, to make it your discipline of doing. It is your habit of conduct. These two commands are going to be the 2 points of our sermon, but notice the promise that is given from doing these two things, thinking and acting, that the God of peace will be with you. Christian, I'm sure that if someone were to come to you and they were able to somehow propose to you that there's something that you could do such that you would have peace that would rule your heart in all circumstances, you would be interested in what are you selling? Is this, do I need to have a certain diet? Like, do I need to eat this and not eat that? Is that how I can actually have peace to rule in my heart in every circumstance? I'm interested. Tell me more. What do I need not to eat? What do I need to eat? In case you're wondering, eating won't fix it. If someone were to say, okay, it's a pill, like if you would take this, super heavenly angel dust nutrients have fallen into this one corner of the globe, which I happen to own, and I have somehow dug it up and put it into this pill. And if you will eat this pill, then you will come to experience a life, no matter what happens to you, you will be able to go through it guided by and with the presence of peace. Would you be interested in this pill? I imagine, despite what you might scoff at, you would think I would be interested in a life that would be marked by that kind of peace, where I no longer would be held sway by my circumstances, where I would not be given over to either anger on one hand or fear on the other. Well, in these two verses, the promise is that God will be with you if you think on these things and you do these things. It is a promise. The way that verse 9 renders the God of peace will be with you makes these two means, these two disciplines, to be the avenue by which God's presence comes to us and then guides us to have peace in all of our circumstances. Now, a couple of Sundays ago, I set up some of chapter 4 of Philippians by contrasting what we tended to think it would be like as a Christian with what it actually is like to be a Christian. And that often we tend to think that life is going to be easier if we are a Christian. And then we come to find out that there's some new difficulties when one becomes a Christian. One of the things that these two verses also helps is that it attacks or approaches or explains a common difficulty with new Christians. Many people think that when I come to put my faith in Christ to be right with God and follow Him as my Lord, then there should be a kind of ease of application of God's commands. That the manner in which I now go through normal life circumstances should be kind of like there should be sort of harps or maybe classical music playing in the background, and I would have kind of this like spiritual Christian Zen focus on the things of God, when in reality that's not the way it works at all. That the same kinds of difficulties that we had as non-Christians, let's just choose one, like being lazy in your thinking, undisciplined in your mind. They now become issues that you also will have to fight and face as a Christian if you want to have the God of peace to be with you and guide and govern you. Another way that we are able to see is often the things that we face in life that are difficult because we actually have to make deliberate decisions, choices. When we become a Christian, we're like, I'm not going to have those difficulties anymore, right? The Holy Spirit will be in me, and it will just be learning how to be this passive vessel of the Spirit of God, only making holy choices because that is the constant gravitational pull of my new life in Jesus. And then you become a Christian and you find out that, hold on, it seems as if I'm having to make white-knuckled, grip on what the holy thing God has called me to do, when there is a strong gravitational pull with even in my own self of that which I know I should not do. Because you actually have to make choices. The same reasons that we might find it difficult to sort of say, okay, 3 helpings of Thanksgiving supper is enough. We find it also difficult when we are Christians to make deliberate volitional choices to do that which God calls us to do. This passage teaches us for God to be present with us, to guide and govern us with peace in all of our circumstances, and especially the difficult ones. It requires that we think and act. That you have to engage your mind to actually think on, to meditate on, to give willful, deliberate, intellectual consideration of certain things and not other things. And then you have to do them, practice what you see before you. So this is what we'll see in this passage. First, the command, which is the first discipline. It's the first means so that the promise of God's presence will come to us as we go through life, is to think on excellent things. Think on excellent things. Now, I hope you can somehow go to YouTube and you can find a much more rhetorically sophisticated sermon than the one I am giving to you. Because this is an incredibly beautiful 2 verses that Paul has turned the volume up on his rhetorical skills. And so he front loads in verse 8 the qualities, and they're all ethical. They're all dealing with issues of objective good and right when it comes to choices in life. And so rhetorically, he gives this kind of rightful flourishing to his command. Whatever is true, And then he navigates, and we'll go through each one of them. But notice he's not trying to parse it out and saying, and let me tell you 7 things that enable you to understand what is true. Rhetorically, he's saying, if it meets the quality of being true, think on it. Give your mind to consider it. Come to understand it so that you might be able to describe it and distinguish it from something that it is not. Meditate on these things. So, as it aims to your own hearing and application of this passage, our propensity is to say, could you please explain more? Could you please give me more descriptive information on what is true, on what is noble? And I want you to at least experience part of the rhetorical effect of the way in which verse 8 is written. It is not so that you would try to say, like, so give me the list. It is rather so that you might say, if anything meets this quality, I should think on it. I should give my attention to it. I should seek to know it and distinguish it from that which is its opposite. Because the command is to meditate, to consider, to think, to focus, to dwell on. And all of these qualities are, in one sense, summarized by what comes at the very end of verse 8. It is these excellent things, these things which are worthy of praise. That's a summary statement of the 6 ethical qualities that he gives here. And so I'm just going to summarize all of them by calling them excellent things. Christian, for God to be with you and to guide and govern you, you need to meditate on that which is excellent. If it is excellent, if it is worthy of praise, you should dwell on it. You should give intentional, intellectual effort and consideration to this particular quality and the object in which you are beholding. Meditation is the sustained attention upon the thing that you are considering. Meditation for Christians is never the absence of thought or emptying your mind. It is, in fact, the opposite. Meditation is thinking intensely upon something so as to neglect every other thing in order to behold this thing. That is meditation. Meditation is with the mind. It is, in that sense, it is an action. It requires effort. It actually requires that you not think about other things in order that you meditate on this thing. Christian, you are to think on excellent things, praiseworthy things. They are to be the objects of your meditation. They are to be the things that you behold with your mind so that you can describe them and you can distinguish them, especially distinguishing the things which indeed are excellent and worthy of praise, and to separate them from the things that are not excellent, things that are in no way worthy of praise. That is how this particular command comes to application in your life. But whatever would meet this quality, meditate on these things. Now, we'll go quickly through the 6 ethical qualities that Paul gives for us to dwell on, to think about. It is interesting, and many people make I think, too big of a deal about this. Paul uses vocabulary words that were common to pagan philosophers, especially the Stoics. But he doesn't use them in order to sort of like give any kind of endorsement to pagan philosophy. He's not in any way endorsing Stoicism in the use of these particular words. He is using them because they were common vocabulary words for the Philippians, who did have, in one sense, a more higher culture compared to maybe some other cities in the Roman Empire. But nonetheless, these words do find use in other places that are not Christian writings of Scripture. And the first that he gives to us is that we are to carefully reflect on the quality of that which is true. in order for it to shape our conduct. Meditate on whatever is true. When it comes to what we think about, what we give our attention to, we need to give our consideration in thoughts, in our dispositions, in deeds, to that which is true. That which is true when it comes to our actions, to our thinking, to attitudes, are things that are morally upright. They are also things which we can depend upon in this life, and we can make it a basis for our decisions, for our judgments. Truth is always dependable for life. Please, please let that sink in. There's a reason this one is first in the list. If it is not true, it is never worthy for you to live on the basis of it. The greatest evil in the world is falsehood. The greatest evildoers in the world are false teachers. The greatest good is truth. And whatever you find that is true, give your attention to dwell on that. That is what enables us to be able to understand what is real. Reality, in one sense, is just to say, I now view things in light of truth. I'm actually seeing reality. The opposite of what is true is that which is a lie, that which is false, that which is perverted and contorted. We must distinguish between whatever is true and give our attention to it, and make sure that we are not giving our attention, not meditating, not dwelling on that which is a perversion of the truth, that which is a falsehood, that which is a lie. Our mental attention needs to be on whatever is true. Now, you need to think in terms of all the different ways in which whatever is true is presented to you. In religion, you need to understand and meditate on that which is true. I will not chase this too far afield, but I listened to a podcast on something called chick tracts. If you know, you know. But one of the things they said about this author of Chick Tracts is they gave him very uncomplimentary names. That he was he hated people. He was sort of a pioneer in promoting hate speech through his particular cartoon Christian tracts, and on one hand, there could be a way in which he very dramatically rendered sin and false religions. But on the other hand, that's exactly what you would say if you actually didn't believe in things being true. And when it comes to religion, there is either true religion and there is false religion, and there is no difference. There's no distinction or mixing of them. And so when it comes to religion, your relationship with God, you must think in terms of what's true. It's true that Jesus is the Son of God who came to the world to die in the place of sinners so that he might bring them into God's redeemed people on the basis of his life and death and resurrection. That's true. Think on that. But thinking on things that are indeed perversions of the truth, or actually disobedience to this command right here. As you consider marriage, obviously in our society, our country with its laws, our state with its laws, they do not put before people in the legislation that which is true. It's not true that a man can marry a man. It's not true that a woman can marry a woman. It's not true that you can have sex with someone who is not your married spouse and call it love. That's not true. And yet, that's what our society considers, dwells on, meditates. We're not like them. Our meditation is on that which is true, and whatever is true, we dwell on. And so you think through marriage, you can think through sexuality, you can think through parenting. Quickly, parents, what's true when your children sin? They're sinners. What's the solution to sin? Jesus. Atonement. Through a sacrificial life given in their place. We just took the Lord's Supper. Children, you can do nothing to reconcile yourself to God, but God has done everything. Parents, parenting requires that you be able to think on what is true, and it will govern and guide you as you navigate parenting. Do you explain your children's behavior or even your own behavior on the basis of things which are not true? I didn't mean to say that, babe. No, that's not true. You always mean to say what you say. What you regret is that you said it. Think on that which is true in your speech. We could go on and extend this into all aspects of life, but whatever is true, meditate on those things. The next is whatever is dignified or noble. Now, I'll have to be honest. This could be its own sermon. You need to think on this particular attribute so that you might consider what is your attention given to. We are commanded to meditate on whatever is dignified or noble. That is to say, whatever is reverent should get our attention. If there's one thing Americans are not, it's reverent. The president now wears an open collar. Can you believe that? Like, has that not been lost on any of us? Like, the United States of America's president will go around in public without a tie on. Now, I hate ties. They're uncomfortable. No, I mean, like, I can't stand to wear these clothes. But let's be honest. Do people look noble in their pajamas? They don't. You look like you're taking a nap. You do not look dignified. You do not look respectable. And yet, what it seems that our society wants to meditate on, dwell upon, consider is that which is not reverent, that which is ignoble, undignified. Our language, our dress, even our architecture is becoming less noble. And in this way, we should be able to say that the Bible teaches us is that we are to give our attention to that which is noble, dignified, reverent. Older men in Titus chapter 2 are said to be dignified, and therefore they are to be treated in a different way. In 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 8, deacons are said to be noble and dignified. I hope, children, I hope you hear me. And it needs to start with your parents. I hope there can be, in one sense, a revival on being able to recover the category called noble. She is a noble woman. He is a dignified man. Do you see the way he carries himself? That is an old way of talking about the manner of his living. That should be something that we see and judge as in and of itself intrinsically worthy of our intellectual consideration. Can you describe things that are noble and dignified? Can you write how they are different than things which are ignoble? If we meditate on that which is, whatever is, noble and dignified, then we would be able to do that. And if we are unable to do that, it's because we have not thought on that which is noble. Now, I'll be honest, there are many different directions that I could go addressing the contemporary evangelical Protestant church and just hold it up as various versions of failing to consider whatever is noble. We can go to our forefathers on this in the church. We can look at what did they do when they worshiped? How did they carry themselves when they worshiped? What did they sing when they were worshiped? All of these things might be things which are noble, which we could look at, which we could consider, which we could dwell on, and they may help us. And in fact, if they are noble and dignified, they will help us, for we are commanded to think on whatever is dignified. In that sense, we can see nobility, in one sense, parade itself outside of the church, outside of formal Christianity, and we should be able to look at that and say, that is noble. I think if you like history, you are able to go back and to read different stories of men acting in a noble fashion. I have to say that I am not the biggest fan of Abraham Lincoln. I know that's a shock to many people. He is the president who has done no wrong, according to most Americans. But while that is true, one of the things that I just want to highlight that Abraham Lincoln did that was incredibly noble is that he knew that after our nation fought a war against itself, the solution would not to be to make these wounds more bitter, but rather to grant amnesty. He granted amnesty to all the Confederates. That's noble. Noble. In this way, we are able to think on things in this life that are dignified in and of themselves. Life is noble. We can paint many pictures of this. I'll just paint some because I want them to go contrary to the kind of things that our society celebrates. When you see, and I'm just going to say it the way it is, I don't mean any offense. When you see an old, wrinkled man and woman who physically are so much less than what they used to be, holding hands and walking down the street, you should think that's noble. Wonderful thing about going, I got to see family. Thank you, elders, for letting me have a weekend off. But what do? You get to see pictures of not only what your parents and grandparents looked like, but what you looked like. And it is amazing to see someone in their early 20s and then to see someone in their 70s. There is a nobility when you look at giving one's life away for another. And you can see it. Their life is spent. We should think on those things. Maybe that's the reason to watch a Hallmark movie, but I don't know. I'll let you judge. We are also commanded to think on that which is right. This is the word that Paul uses in other places in a technical theological meaning, which would say justified. He does not mean that here. This is literally translated right. That means that we need to think, we need to meditate on that which conforms to the intrinsic objective rightness of the thing itself. There is right and there is wrong. And God himself, as the righteous one, everything that he does, everything that he says is always right. Because that's the only thing God could do. He is righteous. But it is also true that there are actions, attitudes, deeds, words that in and of themselves, they are just. They are right. And we should think on these things. We should meditate on these things. In that sense, we rightly do understand that there is a code of honor. Some things are to be done always because they're right. It is always right, boys, for you to prefer girls. It is always right that you defend the weaker. Always right. And whenever you see that, you are able to, you consider it, you meditate on it. Now, too many illustrations would work for us, but it's very easy to contrast. Do the wicked think on these things? Do the unrighteous meditate and dwell on that which is right, intrinsically, that code of honor? They don't. Psalm 36, verse 4 says that they think on that which is evil. Now, I think I can, maybe you can, but I actually can, unfortunately, remember what it was like when I was not a Christian and my manner of thinking, and I did not think on what is right. I did think and meditate and dwell on that which is evil. As a Christian now, I am commanded to think on that which is right, that which is just. Think on these things. Now, what this does mean is that when we are going through social media feeds, which I don't, but you do, you need to consider, what are you looking at? What is this that you are considering? Is it right? If it's not, do not consider it. Move on, or maybe shut the whole thing down. We are to meditate on whatever is right. We are also to meditate on whatever is pure. This can mean holy. It can refer to things which are truly in and of themselves awesome. Okay, kids, awesome doesn't refer to anything that anybody does in athletics or in modern day music, right? It's not awesome. NC State had a great victory yesterday, but it wasn't awesome. But there are things in this world that are awesome. They are truly awesome. Indeed, many of the sort of natural wonders that we go to, I got the privilege of going and standing on the top of Half Dome in Yosemite. And do you know what the rightful conclusion of anyone who stands there and looks out and sees this, almost fictional landscape? That is awesome. But holiness is awesome. Purity is awesome. That which is untainted by anything that is evil or corrupt, that is what we should give our attention to. Moral purity is one manifestation of this particular quality. And so thinking about that which is pure in our appetites is one application of whatever is pure. Think on these things. You could apply this to your business dealings, to the reason that you do what you do and the work that you do. Pure would, in that sense, it would touch motives. We are also commanded to think on what is lovely. This word is not used anywhere else in the New Testament, and so we do have to depend upon the dictionaries to understand its meaning, and the dictionaries tell us that this is that which is pleasing. Something that we might say is it's lovely. It seems that New Testament scholars are able to say that this word is describing things that by their intrinsic attractiveness or agreeableness is judged to be lovely. This could refer to literature or music or architecture. If it is lovely, not because you judge it to be lovely, but because it is in and of itself lovely, dwell on it. Think on these things. Lastly, we have that which is commendable, another word only used here in the New Testament. It is translated best in a positive sense or an active sense, being worthiness, that which is likely to be offensive to people is something that is not commendable, but that which is generally positively commended by people is that which we are told to give attention to consider, to meditate upon. Generally, even though the world is fallen and people are totally depraved and unable to please God in their efforts, this does not mean that they do not have, in a common grace sense, an understanding of what is commendable among their fellow man. Is it not commendable when you see a man love and cherish his wife? That no one really is arguing with that around the world except some absolutely loony birds. But for thousands upon thousands of years in every place, you're able to see that there still is this general sense of that's commendable. When you go and you talk to parents about their children, do they find it commendable that you would accent like, I saw your son do this, and I just want you to tell you that was beautiful? Does that tend to endear them to you, or does that think, who do you think you are? Telling me about some good and noble action that my child has done. No, they generally are going to be endeared to you because you say that. It's a commendable thing. This quality of commendable is those things which people generally think they deserve to be highlighted, and they endear us to one another. There are many commendable things in this present world, and they deserve our attention. We should give intellectual effort to consider them. You could just look at the love and sacrifice that a mother has for her children, and what would you say? That is commendable. I mean, literally, women are made to physically give their life away for the sake of their children. Sorry, ladies, if you didn't understand what it meant to be a woman, I just explained it. That's what it means to be a woman. Your body is designed to give and sustain life. That's commendable. And people have commended that throughout the ages. We should think on these things. We should meditate on these things. These are 6 qualities. They're all ethical, and they are all in and of themselves. And this is where the last 2, they're not conditions, though they are rendered as if they are conditions. If you look at the last 2 phrases in verse 8, if there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, that probably is better rendered to us since. Because we read that conditional clause thinking like, well, maybe they're not. That's not what is meant. It's since these things are excellent, since these things are worthy of praise, which is indicating they in and of themselves possess this praiseworthiness, this excellence. That's why this list of 6 ethical qualities is intrinsically excellent, and it is deserving of our meditation. We're commanded to think on these things. That which is their beauty is not because of the eye of the beholder. It is intrinsic to that thing which is beheld. This is what we are to meditate on. This is what we are to give our attention to. And so the question to us is this what you are thinking on? Do you dwell on these things with your mind? Do you willfully and deliberately give your attention to that which would meet one of these 6 qualities? Or do you let society, whoever's running these social media things, they tell me it's some kind of math equation, statistics piled up into some fancy program that gives you what they think they want you to see? Are you letting them present to you what you are meditating on? This is a moral responsibility for us as followers of the Lord Jesus, for God's presence to be with us. We need to think on these things. And if something in this world is able to meet one of these 6 qualities, then you and I are to judge, then this is worthy of praise, this is excellent, and I will meditate on this. That's all we have time for today. Next week, we will come to the second one, so I apologize. I would like for us to grab, in one sense, that which is obvious. If you aren't thinking, you are sinning. If you do not understand that your mind is a moral category of your responsibility of submission and obedience to Jesus, if you do not understand your thoughts to be that way, then you are resisting the command of the apostle here, which means you're resisting Christ, which means you're sinning. However hard it might be for you and me to think, it is a moral responsibility. Think on these things, and God will be with you. Next week, we'll see, what are we to do? What do we do? If you have questions about what I've said, come and ask me afterwards.